All right, y'all. So 4.6 is more factoring, and we actually call this special factoring. Alrighty, so first few examples are pretty much the same, but I want you to see how these answers are written. So these will say factor. So y'all, for R number 1, they're giving me a R squared minus 12R plus 36. So remember, I'm going to follow my sign rules. Y'all, let me let one in real quick. So notice, first thing I'm looking for, there's no greatest common factor because the R squared doesn't have a number in front of it other than a 1. And then the 36 don't have an R. So there's no greatest common factor. So we're going to go right into our parentheses. So the R squared puts an R in front of both of our parentheses. Now I'm going to put my signs in. So remember, that 36 is positive at the end. Since this 36 is positive, both of these factors will have the same sign as the middle number. So both of these will be negative. Now, y'all, I'm going to tell you the trick in this section 4.6. The two numbers you need here are going to be the square root of that last number. So if we can figure out the square root of 36, we'll have our two factors. So y'all, let me show you square root of 36. And if you need a calculator on that, let's go. I'll show you how to do that on your calculator. So to do the square root on the calculator, you would do the blue second button and then that x squared button. That'll pull that radical up there. And then you just put in your 36. And y'all, the square root of 36 is 6. So let me go back to my paper. So since the square root of 36 is 6, both of these will have a 6 in them. And y'all look at that. -6 and -6 add to get that -12 in the middle. But if you multiplied -6 times -6, you'd get that 36 at the end. Now, the reason this one is a special factoring is because both of these factors are identical. So we could rewrite that as a R minus 6 squared. So this is undoing the ones where y'all had the FOIL and you had parentheses with the exponent behind it. All right, y'all. So same thing. Let me let another one in. How about a R squared plus 16R plus 64? Y'all notice, once again, there's not a greatest common factor to factor out of this. So since I got my R squared in the front, I'm going to put this in two sets of parentheses. All righty, so the R squared puts an R and an R. Once again, that last sign is positive. So since the last sign is positive, both of these factors will have the same sign as the middle. So they will both be positive. So y'all, once again, I need factors of 64 that add to get 16. So in section 4.6, if you can figure out the square root of that 64, you'll have your two numbers. So y'all, if we want to, we can run back to our calculator again. So remember, to do the square root, I'm going to hit the second button and then the x squared button. I'm going to put my 64 under there. And y'all, the square root of 64 is 8. So since the square root of 64 is 8, I'm putting an 8 and an 8. But notice 8 plus 8 equals 16. And then the 8 times the 8 gives me 64. So y'all notice, once again, I got repeating factors. So this will give us the r plus 8 squared. So y'all, that is the trick in this section, is doing them square roots to these last numbers. So look what they're going to do now. A b squared plus a 4 plus a 4b. Now we want to do one thing to this one before we start trying to factor it. We want to get this one in what we call descending order. So our b squared is where it needs to be. But y'all, this 4b needs to be in the middle, and that 4 needs to be at the end. So we're going to rearrange this one. So our b squared is first, then we'll bring down our 4b, and then our positive 4. So once again, you don't have a greatest common factor on this. So that means we can go right into our parentheses. So the b squared is a b and a b. Notice my last sign is positive. So both of these will be positive like the middle. And I need factors of 4 that'll add to 4. So y'all, once again, I just need to figure out what the square root of 4 is. And the square root of 4 is 2. So that'll put a 2 here and a 2 here. So notice once again, 2 and 2 add to get 4. 2 times 2 multiply to get 4. And y'all, since I got repeating factors, I can write that as a b plus 2 squared. So they're not too bad. You just got to play around with these a little bit. Watch my number 4 here. So they're going to sort of turn it up a little bit. 9v squared plus a 12v plus 4. So notice, once again, there is no greatest common factor. So I'm going to go into my parentheses. Now, if you remember on this one, when I couldn't factor out that first number, I multiplied 9 times 4, and that equals 36. So y'all, let's get this started. That v squared is a v and a v. Last sign's positive, so both of these will be positive like the middle. So y'all, for this section, I need the factors of 36. That is a square root. And they got to add to 12. So y'all remember the square root of 36 we said over here was 6. So I'm going to put in my 6 and my 6. But do y'all remember? Since I had to use that 9 to multiply by the 4 to get to 36, once you got your two numbers, you got to divide that 9 back out from both of our factors. Our next step was to reduce these fractions if we could. So if you take a 6 over 9, both of them have a common factor of a 3. So divide the top by 3, you'll get a 2. Divide the bottom by 3, you're going to get a 3. And y'all, this has the same fraction, so that's going to reduce to a 2 over 3 also. Now let me show you a trick on the calculator. So that was what, a 6 over 9? If you go on the calculator and you did 6 divided by 9, it would give you a decimal. But if I turn that decimal back into a fraction, it'll give me a reduced fraction. So to turn the decimal into a fraction, you hit math. And you see how that number 1 is highlighted for fraction? That means it'll turn your answer into a fraction if you hit enter and enter one more time. So there's that 2/3, okay? So if you're weak at reducing your fractions, use that calculator. Now remember, anytime I had a fraction, I had to move the bottom number in front of the variable. So that this gives me a 3v plus 2 times a 3v plus 2. So y'all, let me show you the trick on this. The square root of 9 is 3, so I got a 3 in front of both of my parentheses. The square root of 4 is 2, so I got a 2 at the back of both of my parentheses. So you can still do the square root stuff. Take the square root of the first number to get what's in front, and then the square root of that last number to get what's at the end. And y'all, my final step, remember, I could write this as a 3v plus 2 squared. All righty, so y'all got questions on these yet? All righty, so I'm not seeing anything, so moving on. So next we're going to deal with the second special factoring of the day, is what we call the difference of perfect squares. So remember, difference means they're being subtracted, and perfect squares are those numbers like I did a while ago, 25, 36, numbers that have square roots, okay? So we got a pattern for these. If we get something like this, a squared minus b squared. So notice, difference is the subtraction, and perfect squares would be the a squared minus b squared stuff. If we have difference of perfect squares, they'll factor into a plus b times a minus b. So basically, the square root of a goes in front of both. The square root of the b goes at the back of both. One is positive, one is negative. This factors into what we call conjugate pairs, remember. If you remember, every time we foiled these conjugate pairs, we only ended up with 2 terms like we're starting, okay? So y'all, let's see what these will say. And all they're going to say is factor again. So we're on our number 5. I have a c squared minus 64. Now notice, on these perfect squares, there's no greatest common factor on this. So since I don't have a greatest common factor, I'm going to go straight into my parentheses. All I got in front is a c squared, so that'll be a c and a c. Now remember, these are going to have one positive and one negative. So I'm going to have a positive and a negative. So at the back of both of my parentheses will be whatever number times itself gives me a 64. So I'm basically looking for the square root of that 64 again. And if you remember, square root of 64 was 8. So we will put an 8 and an 8. Now notice, I can't rewrite this with the exponent because these factors are not identical. One's positive and one's negative. So y'all, that would be our final answer. So notice it ended up just like the little pattern showed us up here. b squared minus 49. Same thing, right? There's no greatest common factor. So anytime you got two terms like this being subtracted, you right off the bat want to think about these perfect squares. So come in, draw your parentheses. The b squared would be a b and a b. The last number is negative, so one will be positive, one will be negative. So y'all, all we need now is the square root of 49 to get our two numbers. So let's go over here. Square root of 49 is 7. So since 7 times 7 is 49, square root of 49 is 7. So I would put a 7 here and a 7 there. Now remember, there's not a b in the middle. So it's like a 0b. And if you add 7 and negative 7, you get that 0. But then the 7 times negative 7 gives me the negative 49. So you got to treat all these like there's a 0 in the middle. So y'all watch this. They're going to turn it up a little bit. R squared p squared minus 36. So there's no GCF between these two. So we're going to go right into our parentheses. So y'all, what do you think I would put in the front of both of these parentheses? So good job, Bree. It definitely is a RP on both. RP, RP. The last number is negative. So once again, we got a plus and a minus. So y'all, what's going at the back of both of my parentheses? Definitely a 6. So that'd be the square root of my 36, okay? So y'all, they're not too bad. You just got to remember in this section 4.6, you're mainly looking at square root stuff. All righty, 7a squared minus 7t squared. So y'all, guess what? This one does have a greatest common factor. I got a greatest common factor of a 7 because both these got a 7 in them. So the first thing we want to do is factor out that greatest common factor of 7. So basically take both of these, divide by the 7, and what's left we'll put in here. So the 7a squared, if you divide by 7, the 7's cancel, and you're left with an a squared minus, if you take the 7t squared, divide by the 7, those 7's cancel, and you're left with the t squared. So we factored out our greatest common factor of a 7, but look here. I still got to factor what's inside the parentheses. So you would bring down your 7, right, your 2 sets of parentheses. So I got to figure out what's going in the front of both of these. I got an a squared. So that's going to put what, an a and an a. My last sign is negative, so I got a plus and a minus. And y'all, the t squared is what? A t and a t. Okay, so these are the 8 like you'll have on the homework, okay? So I'm just going to see what y'all would do with something like this. Oh, where'd it go? A 4b3 minus a 9b. So notice this one has a GCF of a B because both these have at least one B in them. So I got a GCF of a B. So I'm going to factor one of the B's out and see what's left. So if you had a 4B to the third and you factored out one B, that's going to leave you two B's. So that'll be a 4B squared minus the 9B. If you divide out 1B, that's going to leave you a 9. So now we got to factor what's in the parentheses. So bring your B down. So what would y'all put in front of both of these parentheses? Okay, so you got a B, but what about that 4? So remember, since that's a 4B squared, the square root of 4 is 2. So you're going to actually have a 2B and a 2B. The last number is negative, so one will be positive, one will be negative. And then at the end, we'll put whatever number times itself equals 9. So the square root of 9 would be a 3 and a 3. So remember, once you get to the part where you're actually factoring the difference of perfect squares, take the square root of the numbers, and that'll give you what you need on the numbers for these, okay? All righty, so questions on that section 4.6. All righty, y'all, so we will move into 4.8. In 4.8, it's solving equations. So solving, and we actually call these quadratic equations because they got those x squared terms. So we're going to be solving quadratic equations by factoring. So here's our steps to solving equations. Y'all, the very first thing you want to do, you want to get all terms on one side in descending order. So get all terms on one side in descending order. Equal to 0. So what that means, you want it to look like this. Your x squared term, your x term, and your number all equal to 0, okay? So y'all, once I got everything on one side equal to 0, my first step is to factor out the greatest common factor if needed. It might not have a greatest common factor, but if they do have a greatest common factor, the first thing I got to do is factor that out. All right, at that point, I'm going to factor the polynomial. Once I factor that polynomial, I'll have my two sets of parentheses equal to 0. At that point, I'm going to set each of my factors equal to 0 and solve for the variable. Now, the reason I can set each factor equal to 0 and solve for the variable is because we're invoking what we call a zero product rule. And the zero product rule says if A times B equals 0, then either A equals 0 or B equals 0. If any of my factors is 0, when you multiply, you will get a 0. So that's how we can set each of our factors equal to 0, is we're invoking this zero product rule. So y'all, once I've solved for the variable, I can check my answers if needed. Okay, so that means I'll plug my answers in for my x's and see if I get a true statement, okay? If it's a true statement, then I'm good to go. So y'all, I'm gonna let y'all write them steps real quick, and then we will start solving some equations. So I will say you learned all that factoring in this section. Chapter 4, you learned all that factoring so that you could solve these equations. All right, y'all, so I'm going to turn the page and we will start on our number 1. And all these are going to say is solved. So y'all look at here. Number 1, I got an r squared plus 8r equals 9. So we're going to break this one down as we go through. Where I have this 9, we said on the right side, we need a 0. So this needs to be 0 on the right side. So to make that a 0, I'm going to subtract that 9 from both sides. And really, if you move something from one side to the other, all you're doing is changing its sign, okay? Now notice, no like terms, but I'm going to put them in descending order. I got my r squared plus my 8r minus my 9 is all going to equal 0. So now everything's on one side equal to 0. There's no GCF because the r squared and the 9 have nothing in common. So since there's no GCF, we're going to go right into factoring this. And once I got it factored, it'll still be set equal to 0. So y'all, here we go. We got an r squared in the front. That's going to be an r and an r. Notice on this one, it's negative. The last number is negative, so one of these factors will be positive. One of these factors will be negative. So remember, your factors have unlike signs when the last number is negative. So now we need to find factors of 9. And also, since that last number is negative, you want factors of 9 that'll subtract to get the 8. So y'all, the only way to get a 9 is a 1 and a 9 and a 3 and a 3. So the ones that'll give you 8 are 9 and 1. So the question is, which one am I going to make positive over here? And which one am I going to make negative? And all that depends on that middle number. Since this middle number is a positive 8, that means the larger factor that we chose will be positive. The larger number always has the same sign as your middle number. So the 9 is going to be positive and the 1 will be negative. Now, if you want to check yourself, 9, negative 1, and to get an 8, 9 times negative 1 equal negative 9. So we're now factored. So remember, my next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set each of these factors equal to 0. Because now we're invoking that 0 product rule. So I'm going to set the r plus 9 equal to 0. Then I'll come in and set the r minus 1 equal to 0. So y'all, let me tell you a trick. Since we had an exponent of 2 up here on our r squared, that exponent of 2 tells me I will get 2 answers on this. So the first one, we're going to subtract 9 from both sides. And you get r equals a negative 9. The second one, to get that r by itself, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And I'm going to get r equals a positive 1. So in MATLAB, it'll have a blank r equals blank. All you do is put your two numbers, negative 9, comma 1. Now, if you wanted to check it, put a 1 up here. 1 squared is 1. 8 times 1 is 8. 1 plus 8 equals 9. If you put the negative 9 in here, negative 9 squared is 81. Negative 9 times 8 is negative 72. 81 and negative 72 add to get a 9. So both answers will check out when you plug them back into that, okay? So remember, we want them in order. We want to look for GCFs if we got it. If not, factor this. And then, are you noticing here? Once you got it factored, look at the answer. If you factored it into a positive 9, your answer will be a negative 9. If you factored it into a negative 1, your answer will be a positive 1. All we're doing here when we're solving for that variable is basically changing the signs of those factors, okay? So here we go, 11x plus an x squared plus 24 is going to equal 0. So we got to do a little work first on this one because we're sort of out of order here. So remember, I need this in descending order, so I'm going to rearrange this. To get this in descending order, I need my x squared up in the front, then my 11x, then my 24, all equal to my 0. All right, y'all, look at that. There's no greatest common factor. And we already got a 0 over here, so we're good with that. So what we're going to do is go right into our parentheses. X squared is an x and an x. My 24 is positive. So since the 24 is positive, Both of these factors will have the same sign as the middle number. So both of these will be positive. So what I need now are factors of 24 that add to get 11. So y'all, let's figure. 24 can be 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. Now, let me show you this. If you're weak at finding your factors of your numbers, use your calculator. I think I showed y'all this. So go to the calculator. Go to this y equals. So the number I'm finding factors of is 24. So I'm going to do 24 and then divide by x. Now, any number you want to find the factors for, divide that by x, okay? Now hit second graph to pull up that table. And y'all, let me start up here at 0. So you can't multiply 0 by any number and get a 24. But there's 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and then 4 times 6. And then if you notice, it just reverses them. 6 times 4, 8 times 3, and so on. You don't want the decimal answers. You just want the ones that gave you integer type numbers, okay? So the one I needed to add to 11 was 3 and 8. So I'm going to go back to my page. So I need 3 and 8 because they add to get 11. So here we go, 3 and 8. So we're now factored. Now set each of these factors equal to 0. Y'all, here we go. Subtract 3 on our first one. We're going to get x equals a -3. On the second one, we got to subtract 8 from both sides, and we get x is a -8. So if they factored and they were both positive, when you solve them, they will both be negative. And then on MATLAB, we don't have the x equals. All we got to do is come in and put our two answers. All righty, so notice they're going to hit us with all types of factoring on this section. So let's see what we got for number 3. All right, y'all, number 3 has a squared plus 2a equals 0. So everything's on one side in descending order equal to 0. So let me ask you this. The first thing we're looking for is a GCF. And guess what? Both of these got A's in them. So remember, we at least got to factor out an A from this. So this one does have a greatest common factor of A. So we bring our A out and put our parentheses. So y'all, here's the question for y'all. If I factor an A out of both of these, what am I going to put in my parentheses? Oh, y'all let me. Oh, good job, Jason. I thought y'all, I done stumped y'all, but good job. A squared divided out of A leaves me an A. 2A, if you divide out of A, leaves a 2. Good job. All right, I can't factor this no further because it's just an A. It's not an A squared in here. So since I factored everything as far as I can go, I'm now going to set each factor equal to 0. Well, the only factor I got here is an A, so automatically that A is going to equal 0 no matter what. And then I put my A plus 2 equal to 0. So y'all think about this. Anytime you factor out a variable as a greatest common factor, it is automatically going to equal 0 for that answer. Now the other one, I actually got to what? Subtract 2. And I'll end up with an A equals -2. So MATLAB will have A equals, and I'm going to have a 0, comma, -2. And y'all, 100% of the time, if you factor out a greatest common factor of a variable, 0 will be that answer, okay? T squared minus 4 equals 0. So notice, this one has no greatest common factor. Nothing common between a t squared and a 4. Which means, now this is what we learned today. So I'm going to factor this into 2 parentheses and set it equal to 0. So in front of both of these, a t squared would be a t and a t. The last number is negative, so I'm going to have one positive and one negative. Factors of 4 that I need. Remember, there's not a t in the middle, so it's like a 0. But y'all remember on these, all I did was take the square root of that 4 to get my 2 numbers. And the square root of 4 would be a 2 and a 2. So if you got 2 terms being subtracted, the numbers will be the square roots that you're going to put in here, okay? All right, so now set both these equal to 0. So if you notice, all I'm going to do, I'm going to turn the positive factor negative by subtracting 2. Then I'm going to turn the negative factor positive by adding 2. So that I get t equals a positive 2. All right, so let's see. They'll have the t equals, and we'll just put what, a -2, comma, positive 2. Are you noticing on every single one of these, I am getting at least 2 answers, okay? All right, y'all. T squared equals 9. So look at that. That 9's on the right side, but remember, I need a 0 there. So that needs to be 0. So to make my right side a 0, I got to subtract 9 from both sides. So y'all, these are not like terms, so I'm going to put them in descending order. I'm going to do my t squared minus 9. On the right side, those cancel, giving me a 0. There's no GCF between a t and a 9. So y'all, we're going to go right into factoring that. So y'all, what am I going to put into both of my parentheses? So let's see if one of y'all can actually factor that for me. All right, so I want a t plus 2 here. And then how about my second one? T minus 2. There you go. Good job. All right, so she got me factored here. T plus 2, t minus 2. Set both of these equal to 0. And once again, all I'm going to do is change the signs by subtracting 2 on my first one, adding 2 on my second one. So really, if you can get these factored, then you know the answers will be opposite in signs, okay? All right, so MATLAB wants me to do a -2 and a +2. All righty, y'all. So let's see. So we're on what, number 6 now? So I'm gonna turn my page. And then let me move this camera back up. All righty, number 6. I got an 8 plus 2c minus a c squared equals 0. So y'all, we can tell right off the bat, we need to put this one in order. So we're definitely going to rearrange this one. But notice my c squared is negative, so I'm going to bring it out as a negative c squared plus my 2c plus my 8, all that equal to 0. Oh, let me see what y'all said on 5. Let me turn that back over. Oh, y'all, good job. 5 should have definitely been 3s. I wasn't paying attention. That was a 9 there, so this would have been a t plus 3 and a t minus 3. So that would have been t plus 3 here, t minus 3. So these answers would have been a -3 and a +3. Just done a good job, because that show was, I was just thinking 4 all the way through that, okay? So definitely need 3s on that answer for number 5. Ooh, I get just going along and carried along and not paying attention. Good job. So y'all, here's the thing on this one. We don't like our first number to be negative. So what we're going to do this, to make this c squared positive, we're going to factor out a -1 from this. So we're going to factor out our -1 and put everything else in parentheses. So a negative c squared divided by -1 makes that a positive c squared. A +2 divided by -1 makes that a -2c. A +8 divided by that -1 makes that a -8. And all equal to 0. Now here's what's nice. We don't like that -1 sitting out front. So basically we can divide both sides by that -1 and it disappears. Watch this. If I divide this side by -1 and this side by -1, the -1s cancel, leaving me a c squared minus 2c minus 8. And y'all look at that. 0 divided by -1 is still a 0. So basically, when you got an equation equal to 0, factoring out a negative, in the long run, all you're doing is changing all the signs, okay? All right. So now we're ready to factor this thing. I got a c squared. That'll be a c and a c. The last number is negative. So one of these is positive, one is negative. I need factors of 8. That'll subtract and get a 2. So y'all, let's see what we got. 8 is 1 and 8. And then what? 2 and a 4. So 2 and 4 is the numbers I need. The middle number is negative. So the larger number 4 will be negative. And the 2 will be positive. All right, y'all, set both these equal to 0. All right, so let's see. First one, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. I get c is a negative 2. The second one, I'll add 4 to both sides and get c is a positive 4. So y'all, the moral of this one was rearrange it first and then factor out that negative 1. And remember, the negative 1, when you factored it, changed all the signs inside these parentheses. But now, since it was an equation, I can get rid of that negative 1 by dividing both sides by that negative 1. And all that was left was my parentheses, and I set that equal to my 0. Oh, here's a good one. 3v squared plus 20v plus 32 equals 0. So y'all, guess what? Unfortunately, there's not a greatest common factor on that. So I cannot get rid of that 3 on this one because 20 won't divide by 3 and 32 won't divide by 3. So remember, I'm going to multiply 3 times 32, and that's going to give me 96. So we're going to set our parentheses up, and then we'll play with that 96 there. So remember, I'm going to start out with a V in front of both parentheses. Last sign's positive, so both factors will be positive like the middle number. And y'all, guess what? I need factors of 96 that'll add to get a 20. So 96 is a bigger number, so let's use our calculator to get those factors. So I'm going to share my calculator. I'm going to go to the y equals, clear that one out. So since I want factors of 96, I'm going to do 96 divide by x. And then I'm going to look at my table by hitting second graph. So 1 and 96 don't work. 2 and 48 don't work. Remember, these got to add up to get me a 20. 3 and 32 don't work. All right, keep on going. 4 and 24 don't work. 6 and 16, getting closer, but that don't work. Oh, y'all, look at that. 8 and 12. 8 and 12 will add to get 20. So my factors are going to be 8 and 12. So we're going to go back now. 8 and 12 were my factors. So I'm going to put my 8 and my 12. But remember, since I used that 3 to multiply by the 32, I now got to divide out that 3. So let's see if I can simplify my fractions. So y'all, the first one, I cannot simplify no further. So I'm going to move the 3v plus 8. So remember, if you cannot simplify it, you move the number on bottom in front of the variable. Well, this one I can simplify. 12 divided by 3 will give me a 4. So we're now factored So now set each of these factors equal to 0. And y'all, I'm going to show you a trick on this one. First thing we're going to do is subtract 8. So I get 3v equals a -8. Then I'm going to divide both sides by the 3. So the 3's cancel, and I get my first answer is a -8/3. Y'all check this out. My answer was a -8/3. Look, when I first factored it, my fraction was a +8/3. So once you get it to this point and you can't simplify the fraction, if you change the sign, you got one of the answers. Now for the second one, I'll take the v plus 4, set that equal to 0. And on that, all I got to do is subtract 4 from both sides, and I get v is a -4. So, like I said, once you're at this point, if that fraction does not reduce, change the sign and you got your final answer. So y'all, let's see. We're going to have v equals a -8/3, comma, a -4. All right, y'all. So, but you notice that every time we're following our sign rules. The last one's positive, both signs were the same as the middle. If the last one was negative, you automatically had unlike signs. All right, that was number what, 7? All righty, so our number 8. So let me move that camera back up. All righty, number 8, 6v squared plus a v equals 2. So once again, there's a 2 on the right side. That 2 needs to be a 0. So to make that a 0, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. So none of these are like terms, so I'm going to put them in descending order. 6v squared plus my v minus my 2, all that's going to equal 0. All right, so remember, first thing I'm looking for is a greatest common factor. Well, the v don't have a number, and the 2 don't have a v, so there's no greatest common factor. So we're going to multiply 6 times 2, and that's going to give us 12. So 12 will be the number that I'm going to find my factors from. So set up your 2 parentheses. V squared will be a v and a v. Your last number is negative. So that means you got unlike signs in those parentheses. So what we need to do are find factors of 12. Now remember, that's a 1 in the middle. So I want factors of 12 that will subtract to get a 1. So let's see, we got 1 and 12, 2 and 6. What's left? 3 and 4. So 3 and 4 are the ones that subtract to get the middle number of a 1. The larger number 4 is going to be positive like the middle number. The smaller factor will be negative. So y'all remember this. Since I multiplied that 6 to get the product here, I got to divide that 6 back out of both of my numbers. So the 4/6 will reduce to a 2/3. So I divided both of them by 2 to get my 2/3. Over here, a 3/6. Well, both of them will divide by 3, making that a 1/2. All this equal to 0. So y'all, I'll tell you the truth, at this point, I probably wouldn't even move these numbers up front. All I would do at this point, I would set both these equal to 0 and get your answers. Now you can move the 3 up in front and the 2 up in front. But y'all, if you leave it as a fraction at this point, all we got to do is subtract the 2/3 from the first one from both sides. And we'll get a v equals a negative 2/3. So all we did basically was change it from a positive 2/3 to a negative 2/3. And then here we would add 1/2 to both sides. And I get v equals a positive 1/2. So if you can get me these fractions at this point, change the signs and get them final answers. So y'all, I'm going to put in my negative 2/3, comma, 1/2. All right, y'all, number 9 is a tricky one. So watch what they're doing to number 9. It says, let f of x equal x squared plus 12x plus 36. 35. Woo, make that a 35 at the end. X squared plus 12x plus 35. But it says this, find a such that f of a equals 3. So when they're saying this, find a such that f of a equals 3, they want you to take this function, x squared plus 12x plus 35, and set it equal to that 3. So you'll take your polynomial and set it equal to the number they give you. So, here's the thing on this one. I got to solve this again, but guess what needs to be where the 3 is? That 3 needs to be a 0. So to make that a 0, we got to subtract 3 from both sides. And look at that. You've got a number on this side, so you can subtract 3 from that number. So watch this. You'll get an x squared plus your 12x. Numbers are like terms, so 35 minus 3 will make that a 32. All that equal to our 0. So, got my 0 here. No GCF, because the x squared don't have a number. So we're going to go factor this. So y'all, x squared means an x and an x. Last number's positive, so both of these factors are going to be positive like the middle. I need factors of 32. That'll give me a 12. So y'all, let's play with that 32. That'll be 1 and 32, 2 and 16. 3 don't go. 4 and 8, and that's it. But the ones that I had to get 12 are 4 and 8. So put in the 4 and the 8. And y'all, like before, all I'm going to do on the rest of this is change these two signs by setting both my factors equal to 0. So I'll subtract 4 on the first one Then on the second one, I'll subtract 8. And I get x is a -8. But now in the answer blocks, they'll say, if f of a equals 3, then a will equal our answers, which were what, a -4 and a -8. Okay. So remember, they'll give you a polynomial, and then they'll say f of a equals some number. Set the polynomial equal to that number. Get your 0 on the right side, then start factoring. All right, y'all, we got one more to go. So there was only 10 in this section. But these equations are a little tricky, so that's why we only had 10, okay? Let me move back up here. So for our number 10, this one says, let g of x equal 2x squared plus 3x. So this one's like the last one. It says find a so that g of a equals 20. So guess what? I'm going to take my polynomial 2x squared plus 3x, and I'm going to set it equal to the 20. So y'all, same thing as Walgo. Set the polynomial equal to the amount that they want. Now to solve this, that needs to be a 0 again. So to make that a 0, I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. Now notice, this time I don't have any like terms on the left side, so I'm just going to put them in order. 2x squared plus my 3x minus my 20 is all going to equal 0. All righty. So now I don't have a GCF because 2 and 3 don't have nothing in common. So we're going to multiply the 2 times the 20. That's going to give us a 40. So let me get my parentheses set up. I got an x squared, so that'll be an x and an x. Remember, the last number is negative, so you're going to have unlike signs. So what I need, y'all, are factors of this 40 that will subtract to get a 3. So 40 is another bigger number, right? So we got a calculator. So I'm going to do 40 divided by x right here. And then I'm going to hit second graph to pull up my table. So let's see. 1 and 40, those don't subtract to get a 3. 20 minus 2 don't give me a 3. 10 minus 4 don't give me a 3. But y'all look at that. 8 and 5. 8 minus 5 will give me a 3. So my numbers are going to be 8 and 5. So remember, the larger number 8 will be positive like the middle number. And then the 5 will be negative. And just remember to check yourself, 8 and -5 equal a positive 3. Okay? So y'all, the rest of this is just setting these equal to 0. First one, we'll subtract our 8, change its sign from positive to a -8. The second one, I'll add 5 and change that from a -5 to a +5. So the answer blank will say, if GA equals 20, then the A has to equal, well, we got what, a -8 and a 5. All right, y'all, that was 4.8. So let me see what my chat's saying here. Oh, did I do it again? I sure did. I sure did, y'all. I'm going too quick on this. So scratch that bottom out and do, whoo. Okay. Since I multiplied by the 2, I gotta divide by the 2. Girl, I'm glad you're on that, Jasona, because you done caught me twice tonight. So, whew, I feel bad for y'all tonight. Been a long day. All righty. Since I multiplied by the 2, I definitely got to divide that 2 back out. So let's see. The first one, 8 divided by 2, that'll give me what? An x plus 4. Y'all, the second one, I cannot reduce that, so I'm just going to bring that. Remember, you could move the 2 in front of the x, but since we're solving an equation, I'm just going to bring that down as a fraction like I did a while ago. That way, when solving it, we just have the one step. All right, so I'm going to set both these equal to 0. All righty, y'all. So the first one, subtract 4. We will get a -4. And then the second one, add 5/2. And we get x equals a positive 5/2. So then we would put what? Our 2 answers in the box of a -4 and a positive 5/2. Y'all feel bad. I usually don't do that many mistakes on my problems, but y'all done got me twice today. Yeah, so I wasn't paying attention to my problem up here. I just got my factors and kept running, okay? So definitely, if we multiply by that first number, we got to divide it back out. All righty, y'all. So that was our number 10. So, whoo, that's all of them problems, okay? I'm scared to send you my video now because once I send it to other people, are going to be going crazy on them 2 problems. But I'll send it anyway. So let me stop my recording.